Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. It's lovely to see all of you, both existing members of our community and many new faces. This is fantastic. Great. I am chatting a link to everybody right now. This is the link to the slides that we will be using today. I'm not going to be presenting anything on the screen. This is so that you can interact with the slides both during today's session and at your own pace. Afterwards, I'll include a PDF version post-session. But this is a way to sort of keep you all engaged. You can interact with the slides. You can refer back to it as we're going through the conversation today. But yeah, it's wonderful to see everybody. So my name is Seema Patel. I am a senior advisor with Collective Mind. It is lovely to see everybody. So for those who know us, I'm just going to give a very quick Collective Mind introduction on slide 2 for anybody who's new to our event. So if you are new to our event, we are basically all about networks. We are here to support those who work for and with networks and basically help you to do your job better and more impactfully and effectively. One side of what we do is consulting, providing advisory services, tools, capacity building, coaching, working with network teams, etc. And the other side of what we do are things like this. We hold learning sessions. We provide professional development opportunities. We have foundational learning sessions about network management and networks and network management. And then we also have sessions like this, community conversations and networks in action that are really all about engaging you all in a very participatory and inclusive conversation and having you all really bring the wisdom that you have into this virtual room and share it with your network peers. So that's what today is about. We actually have a co-host for today, InHive. I did not have an opportunity to get the logo up, but once we get to the introductions, I'll have Brendon share a little bit more about InHive because he was kindly and very supportively part of this whole process. And with that, I would actually really love to transition into learning a little bit more about who we have with us today. It's a great number. I think it's going to make for a really interesting conversation. So I would love for you all to look at slide 3 onwards, the next few slides after slide 3, and to just start chatting in information about yourself. Just very casually, your name, your network, where in the world you are today, and how are you feeling. You should all be able to just go right in and edit the slides. And let's just take a minute to go ahead and learn a little about who you all are and how everybody's feeling today. And there's plenty of room. Yeah, it looks like great. Folks can move on to slides 5 or 6 as needed. Yeah, a lot of what
this process. I think it's really fun just to give everybody a chance to do that in a place where then, you know, it's there for all of us after the session. Thanks.
Seema. Yeah, of course, agreed. A lot of how everybody's feeling today is really resonating with me. It's a very early start today with a 7:30 a.m. meeting, so I'm also a bit groggy. Midweek nez, I love that. Lots of sleepy people. Yeah, I wonder.
Well, I think the time for some people is pretty rough, pretty early or pretty late.
They're like 2 days into the week, still have 2 days left of the week. It's like, eh.
It's that
Wednesday.
poor Wednesday.
I also love this process, but mine seems to have disappeared on the third page. I don't know if other people can see it or if the third page disappeared for other people as well.
Oh,
Is
it might
blank?
just because it carried. Let me see if I can expand.
Okay. But this is really nice. I think I'm gonna copy this
Yeah,
from some of my
yeah,
future sessions.
it's a great
Yeah.
technique.
Well, all the credit goes to Kirsten, who's also on the line.
Thank you, Kirsten.
So if yours is not showing up, doesn't look like I can expand it. If you want to just move on
we
to.
can just retype. There were two people before me, so theirs might have gotten deleted too. But
Yeah, there you go. Wonderful. Great. Well, thanks all for doing that. That's nice. It's nice to kind of take a pulse of how everybody's feeling and where you're coming from. So we can go ahead and move into the agenda slide, which is slide. So we've already sort of just going to continually add the link. So I'm sorry if that's a distraction. The link to the slides for new people. So for anybody that just joined, you can click on that link in the chat to access today's slides. We're on slide 8. So for the agenda today, we've already sort of cut through the first few items, welcoming and checking in with everybody. What we're going to do today is try something a little bit different in terms of the format, and this is really all about engaging everybody in a conversation that again sort of taps into the experiences that you all have. It's a fishbowl format. Brendon, do you mind sort of taking it from here and explaining how the fishbowl format will work for today?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Brendon. I'm really excited for this conversation. I've wanted this to happen for a long time with people other than I've been having this in one-on-ones for many months, but and June and I in particular, I've been having it a lot with each other. So we're really excited to talk with one another. I think that when we were talking with Seema about how to structure this, we said we didn't want it to be like a presentation. June will share some thoughts and I'll share some thoughts that we've had, but this is kind of a new topic and there's a lot to explore. So we wanted to leave a space where we're actually exploring some key questions together. So after we do a little bit of sharing, like just a few minutes, we'll open it up to a fishbowl, which I'm sure some of you have experienced a fishbowl before. A slight adaptation where June and I will kind of stay in the room. If we were in the bowl, if we were in a physical room, we would all be basically in a circle in chairs, and there'd be 4 people in the middle. Fishbowl's usually 3 or 4 people, and they'd be talking. And anytime you want to step in, you tap somebody's shoulder and they'd step out. The virtual fishbowl is what we can do is have 4 people unmuted at the same time, and those 4 people are talking with each other. So June and I will stay so that we'll ask you questions. We don't want you to just come and ask questions and kind of to explore the topics together. But when you want to step in, you just kind of tap in. So let's say Mutaz is in the room and Sabira wants to step in. She just types in the chat, I'm going to step in for Mutaz. So Mutaz mutes himself, Sabira unmutes herself. And this way we kind of have a flow where everybody who wants to participate gets to participate, but we're talking to each other because we felt this is a topic that we want to explore together. So Seema, is that a good introduction? Should we jump?
Indeed.
Wow, yeah, I was confused because you're unmuted, but
It is, yes, thank you so much for that. I was just inviting a few more people. So let me just go back. Yeah, before I actually turn it over to you both, I think to do just a little bit more introduction to yourselves, sort of where you're coming from and sort of where we want to take this conversation and sharing your initial thoughts on the topic. What we try to do, so if you look at slides 9 and 10, this is just a brief summary. It may not seem brief, at least slide 10, but we try to ask questions during the registration process to learn a little bit more about what you all think about the topic, where you're coming from, what your thoughts are. It helps us organize and orient ourselves around the conversation. It also gives us a little bit of a landscape how to approach the topic, and even how to build future topics that we're working on in Collective Mind. So these slides are here for you to look at whenever you have time. So it kind of gives you a nice pulse of, you know, where people are in terms of whether or not they think about themselves as a network of networks, and then how they define it. You know, when we ask people to describe how their organization is a network of networks, there were definitely a lot of similar descriptions, and I've anonymized them all here, but there are also some nuances. So you can look at those whenever you want, but I wanted to make sure that those responses, which you took the time to write, were shared with you all back. So with that, and Brendon and June, if you ever want to refer to any of the slides, just let people know which slide you want to refer to. But what I'm going to do right now is kick it over to you to start talking just very broadly about your thoughts about network of networks. And meanwhile, I'm going to chat some questions into the chat box. And those are what can be used to sort of spur participation in this fishbowl format from anybody who's ready and willing to jump in and be part of the conversation.
Thanks.
That sounds good. Yeah, Brendon, why don't you start us off?
Thanks so much, Seema. And hi, everybody. I think, I'll be very brief, and then I think kind of I'll share a bit about why I'm coming to this topic, and just I think I'll share one slide that will show kind of the thoughts that I've developed to date, but then I'll hand it over to June, who probably a lot of you know is like she calls herself the grandmother of networks, but has been doing this work in networks for years and years and years, and has, I think, been doing a lot of thinking about the concept of networks. So I'll do a bit of the some of the practical stuff from my own experience recently, and then June will go a bit deeper as her mind is deeper and bigger than mine. Basically, so I work at InHive, that is an organization that, like Collective Mind, who we collaborate with, supports networks. We have clients that we support, but over the years, we've realized that because part of our mission is to support networks that come particularly from low resource and marginalized contexts, that work with youth, we realize that most won't be able to afford to hire a consultant organization. So we kind of put together a network of networks to help them learn. We overcome barriers hang on, I'll just share some slides now to make it faster. How do we overcome barriers in networks, like capacities and mindsets, or accessing resources, or demonstrating our impact? And we decided, instead of trying to do this all ourselves, it makes sense to actually bring people together to connect, to have open learning, peer-to-peer events, to share opportunities, to support one another. So all the stuff that we do with networks, but actually doing it for allowing networks to kind of do all of that together. And a lot of the things that are important for kind of building a sector, advocating and telling stories about why networks, why all of this is important. And one of the things that we've been really trying to think about is just almost like this value statement of, part of this is to pitch to funders, but also part of it is for our own understanding, why would we bring all these networks together? Like what's the real value? And I think part of it is that, one thing is that there's kind of reduced costs when you are allowing people to just share knowledge and expertise one another. And this doesn't necessarily apply just to networks, but these could be organizations that are working on specific issues. So increasing the learning, but I think kind of also greater innovation, cross-pollinating ideas and perspectives, long-term learning, like honing the skills and capacities for leadership, especially because network work is something that we're always changing and evolving and learning new things. So not seeing it as like you learn something and then you go do it, but you can always grow and evolve. Reducing the silos and duplication of efforts in the sector. And then I think some of the more interesting things, but some of the more complex things that are not so clear, at least to me now, is bringing networks together. It's one of the things I've been talking a lot about lately is how networks are almost if we're talking about systems change, almost an essential tool to changing systems, because if you want to change mindsets, if you want to change core kind of like values across society and core power structures, you need to do that through networks. A lot of movements are networks, and they do that through this. And how, if you have one network, you can maybe mobilize thousands, but if you have 20 or 30 networks, you can mobilize millions. And so kind of, I think, I want to say that that's an extremely brief introduction to kind of my thinking so far in networks of networks. But to be quite honest, I shared this slide a few months ago with a bunch of friends on LinkedIn and got probably about 20 comments for improvement, which is why I didn't want to come here today and say like, I want to tell you all about networks of networks, but I want to really hear from all of you. What are your experiences, whether you're running one, you think you're running one, you're trying to run one, or you've seen one, or you participated in one, or you have no idea what a network of networks is, and you're asking questions. All of these, I think, are relevant points. We really want to use this as a space to discover, I think, are networks of networks the same as networks? Are they different? What is the added value if you have a networks of networks approach? Do you need to completely do new model, et cetera, et cetera. So, but before we start to have a conversation about that with you, I'll turn it over to June to give us some more guided thought processes than me.
And maybe, Seema, you need to share the link again so people can get onto slide 10. Where I just have a simple visual about networks of networks. Now, I mean, I have been this last year trying to really explore the whole concept of transformation. Like, how is the world going to be good for all of us? And what I'm realizing is that we have to think so much more ambitiously than we have. We really, you know, we need billions of people working on shifting the world and shifting how we see power, shifting ways that we interact with each other. And so that's when I really started thinking that it's not just about networks, but networks of networks. We need to get together with other networks to really get to the scale that we're going to need to get to the kinds of actions, the kinds of learning, the kinds of supporting each other that we need. And so I made this little graphic some time ago. Actually, this graphic is from somebody I believe in, oh dear, I don't have the connection, but somebody who did this nice graphic that really helped me understand. So just to get some definition straight, like many of us are involved in a local network, and we know that local networks, place-based networks, are so important because that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where real action can happen and where we can do a lot of experimenting about what needs to change. But if that's all that we do, we're not going to, you know, there's many, like local food access networks all around the world, but they're not necessarily connected with each other. And so what they do, it can't add up to the kind of change we really want. And so more and more people are getting together in networks and networks, but there's many different kinds of networks and networks. So I'm just going to do a little quick definition. So the most common is sort of a sector or issue or focal point network of networks. So let's say food access groups around the country began to get together in regularly. Like I know there's a council network in the US that meets together regularly, and it's from, you know, many dozens, maybe even 100 different local food policy council networks. And so the reason why that's so important is that then there's so many things, as Brendon was talking about, that you can do together. You can learn together. You can, you know, we're not right now, not even connected to each other's successes or information. I know that I try to get dozens and dozens of newsletters from different networks so that then I can share them on Network Weaver, and I put that link in there. But but how many of us are actually have somebody on our staff that's checking out other networks newsletters and putting some of that good information, sharing it with our networks so that we can benefit from their learning. So there's so many things, and I'm really anxious to hear about what you all are doing, how you are benefiting from these networks of networks. And I have a slide deck. I don't really want you to look at it now, but it does have some more stuff about networks of networks. And you can look at it later and get some more ideas. But and feel free to add. You can edit this slide deck that I just suggested, add ways that you use your networks of networks. But just one other thing is, I think another kind of network of networks is ones like Brendon's doing it at Nexus, where all different kinds of networks are coming together to learn and to learn and share and figure out what makes things change. So we need to do those kinds of networks as well. We also need to think about what I call networks. So I think it's really important to have your folks in your networks interact with other networks that are exploring kind of interesting new ways of looking at our culture. And I'm thinking about a lot of the anti-racism work, indigenous ways of understanding the world are really important for folks in our networks to access, so that they can really get a deep understanding of the systems in the world that we're needing to change. So with that, let's just go ahead and dive into a fishbowl. So sending it back to you, Brendon.
So just in case anybody came on late, which I think maybe there are one or two people, the way that we're doing this is we're having probably for about 20-25 minutes, just an open conversation. June and I will always stay in, but we'll invite two people to always stay with us and dialogue around some of these questions that Seema shared in the chat, or other questions. I think really what we want to explore is what do you see as a network of networks? What questions do you have? Thanks, Seema, we just did the same thing. What examples do you have of what works, what doesn't work, what's the same around like a normal network model, what's different, and talk with each other. So you can ask us questions, we'll ask you questions, we can just reflect. Don't view this as like, come and ask the panelists Q&A, but view it as like, let's have a collective process of inquiry. I want to ask, if nobody raises their hand, then I'll nominate, but I want to ask if there are two brave souls who want to unmute themselves and start, and then slowly other people I'll help guide you to step in in case you're not familiar with the fishbowl process. Anybody want to raise their hand and join June and I just to start talking about the concept? Going once. Okay, Motaz, you're in. Who else? Motaz and John. Okay, unmute yourselves and stay unmuted so we can talk to each other, and we'll let both of you just start.
John, do you want to go first?
No, I need to be model in terms of what the conversation. So, but I would like to share though.
Well, me too. But I think I'm reckless enough that I'll just go for it.
Okay.
Well, here's what's coming to my mind. A couple of things. First of all, many networks, especially the impact networks, are by design microcosms of the system they're trying to shift. So they're already trying to incorporate or have some kind of representation of every relevant stakeholder, whether those stakeholders are showing there in their capacity as influencers in the system, or because of they're at the receiving end of an unjust system, so their voices are important in the system. So for those, ostensibly, they already have everyone there, or have some relationship, or are already tracking everyone there. And for those kinds of networks, my instinct is that, you know, for them, them being part of another network really just means the partnerships that they are prioritizing at a given moment. We're collaborating with this group, that coalition, this organization, that demographic group around this innovation, this campaign, or so on. And so I think personally, and this is like my total personal bias, the less, like I try to take away the word network, actually, as much as I can. It's just already busy people doing important stuff. Now they're doing it together. They're called a network. I know it's a network. They don't have to worry about it being a network. Right. That's very back end. Mm-hmm. And so on one hand, adding network of networks, just at the like branding communication level, feels like it might sort of give people like blood pressure issues. Some people I've worked with, that's on one hand. And so in a sense, I like to think of sort of ecosystems of networks. Mm-hmm. That's gentler, and that sort of, I think, allays concerns of additional process, additional institutionalization or formalizing stuff. That's one piece. The other piece is sometimes there will be networks plugged into other networks. And the fun question that brings up is how well primed is a given network for docking into or partnering with other initiatives? How fast can they make decisions internally about partnerships, sharing resources, shared branding, and campaign stuff? And that has to do with internal decision-making and information sharing. And so healthy networks, the health of networks is conditional on the internal health of a given network in terms of its decision-making around collaborations. Those are my thoughts.
Maybe not. I mean, I think you picked one of the hardest things, like really collaborating on a big campaign where you do have to, your network has to make a lot of decisions about that. That's probably one of the hardest and one of the last, I would suggest. I think there's softer ways, and yeah, you know, if network means an organized formal network, I think networks of networks is maybe the wrong term. I think here, what I'm thinking about, that network of networks is often very informal. So it's just like you start reaching out to other networks and say, hey, if we're going to want to train more network weavers or network facilitators, why not do it together? And then that's a way for us our networks to get to know each other. And so we go to Collective Mind and say, hey, would you run a workshop for us on network leadership? And we want to do this with all the networks involved in criminal justice, all the criminal justice networks we know. And we want us to train our network leaders so they get to know each other. So it's just like you're not doing anything more. You've got to train those folks, but you're doing it in a way that they're going to start building their relationships to these other networks where, you know, where they're going to be able to gain so much value. They'll be able to benefit from what those networks are learning, the kinds of strategies they're trying out.
Let me ask, because I don't know if both of you are, maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. It almost sounds like both of you are advocating for a hands-off, like maybe like light touch approach, and then letting the magic flow. In terms of, maybe I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is it sounds like more cross-pollination of networks. So maybe weaving some of those connections, letting some networks touch each other. But first of all, is that two networks finding kind of alignment event? Second of all, if you really want to, if you bring together, for example, all those networks that are specifically in a space and you do a weaving training and they meet, if you develop some of those initial cross-pollinations, but if you really kind of want to move and maybe make the action bigger or really find alignment or deepen the learning, doesn't that need to be more coordinated, more, okay, so maybe I was not hearing
Well, let's hear
wrong.
Lindsay her into the fishbowl
We
because she
we
has
haven't
a
heard
real
John yet.
story about how they've done a little bit of that.
Let's
Lindsay, can
hear
you
from
unmute?
let's hear from John first.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
okay. Okay, it's just that it was on the same topic. If we could just
Yeah.
take.
John just hasn't had a chance to speak because we
Okay.
overpowered
Yeah,
him.
well, I need to kind of put some things in context. I've been, first of all, I've been a fan of yours, June Holley, for a long time, about 20 years. And it's so good to be in this space with you.
Thank you.
My work over, I'm 85 years old, number one. And my work has been primarily been very involved in the Episcopal Church through the Union of Black Episcopalians, and have been very involved in the politics of the church over the years, the last 50 years. And just this past year, I kind of defined who I am at this point in my life. There's two Johns. One is the legacy John that I bring to the table, having lived through graduated from high school in 1954 when Brown versus Board of Education, having grown up in segregated schools and lived through that and have had a fairly successful career as a financial advisor and working in the church. And today, so excited about what is emerging and all the relationships that I've worked in over the last 50 years. So one John, legacy John, where I got the corporate history and the experiences, but what I see emerging is this next generation and the idea of networking, both informally and learning more about how to be intentional about being the fractal now and making connections that I think makes sense, sometimes formally, most of the time informally, but nurturing that next generation of leaders and bringing them together with both the history as well as what's emerging. So the idea of networks of networks, I see that I'm connected to a lot of networks, but how do I use both my life experience and the use of technology, like, and tapping into that new emergent. So that's kind of why I'm on the call, I guess, to be a part of this group.
Thanks.
Well, it's really important work to reach out and talk to those different networks. And, you know, I call closing for where if you talk to one network and they about some need that they have, talking to they have that same need, you can just simply connect them together, whether it's a need for information about a strategy or whatever. So you can go ahead and be that network weaver and begin to connect networks, you know, formally. So, you know, I think that's a real important job, and just talking to people about the importance of connecting and how people can support other. So,
Lindsay, just, I know you have to hop off in 2 minutes. I know you started sharing in chat, but if you want to just also unmute yourself, since you're technically unmute yourself and share a bit. And like I said in chat, whoever wants to step in, we'll keep this going. I see a lot of you are typing in chat, but I encourage you just to step in, but tap somebody out. So like Galu, if you want to step in, just say, I'm going to step in for John. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for letting me join the space. I want to continue joining these conversations. I shared in the chat, you know, the example I highlighted was our Repro Coalition, coalition needed some training, the Tech Sledge 101 and 102 training. And we decided to use that as some of our cross movement organizations who also, you know, had new staff that they needed to train on the basics of how to operate in the Texas legislature. And so we invited them to that training, you know, one as a way to model sharing resources across movements here in Texas, but also as an opportunity to continue to strengthen those relationships, to plant seeds for future collaborations across movements here in Texas. You know, we can't work in silos and be successful, as I'm sure you've all seen. The more of us sort of aligned, the better.
And I'm curious if you have a moment, what have you seen that work that really works?
Well, another, and I have to hop off in 1 minute, y'all, but another example I can lift up is during this last legislative session here in Texas, which was a nightmare. The freeze last year and moving to virtual, the Texas, members didn't allow public testimony virtually. And so Cross Movement Org sort of rallied together behind this hashtag Texas deserves better. And it was this unifying sort of cross progressive movements here in Texas, and sort of, again, laid the foundation for rallies under that banner and marches, and really led to a lot of great collaborations.
Thanks, Lindsay. That reminds me, I think of one of the podcasts I was listening to. I think it was radio. They were talking about how the AIDS movement, how it, they were debating, there were different strategies during the AIDS movement as to kind of, and there was lots of the different kind of networks and movements about what was the right strategy. Some were very peaceful, some were very in your face. But the movement, different networks, so like feminist ones, gender equity ones, obviously racial equity ones, and they basically there was so much infighting all the time. And the conclusion of this podcast was one strategy or another that worked, but it was a kind of together that worked. And this kind of both in your face and this quiet, peaceful protests and this quiet at the same time is really what made start to real success and make some real change. And I thought that was really interesting because it shows it's a bit adding to what Lindsay was just saying, in that it's amplify, but also by diversifying the strategy, get a lot deeper and a lot further. I see that kind of there's a lot of people that are typing in chat. I'm wondering if Bruce and who else has been typing a lot. Kirsten or anybody else wants to unmute and hop into our conversation now. Could be Kalu. Just Wes. Yeah. Okay, so Wes, go ahead.
Hi. Conversation is really interesting as this is like I'm seeing to the future because my network is a baby. It just founded last year, and it's really slow in terms of development as a network because it's pretty tricky. It's a network of NGOs working in marine and fisheries sector in Indonesia, so Pacific. But then there's some to be working organically. So of some networks within our network, they have more specific networks. For example, NGOs working for fisheries advocacy, all that stuff. Yeah, so I think I'm really enjoying this discussion, but really digesting so much of everything that's coming. I don't have any thoughts as for now, but I'm really enjoying the discussion.
What are your key questions? Like what's something that's you're really struggling with at the moment that's really live for you?
Whether or not my network will be a network of networks. Whether it'll be right now, the network itself is still pretty informal. We're just going to talk about our membership in the next 2 months, and then we're probably gonna have a test to have a secretariat also in the next 2 months. And then I don't know whether it's gonna be a network of networks. I see where it's how network of networks or ecosystem of network, I like that very much, would be something that will be, developing into that way. But I guess it's a good idea to be, thinking about that since now. Maybe that's what I'm doing.
Your last point about ecosystem, I was going to respond to Motaz, but I didn't want to dominate before, was I think I'm going to start borrowing that as liberating. And you can, first of all, it allows you to not complexify it too much. But in a way, ecosystem also gives people a sense, I don't know why, but it gives people a sense of what I find the biggest challenge of convening networks is a sense of the why. And I have found that to be one of the hardest challenges in the beginning of, like, if we're going to bring you together and offer you these spaces, people say they want it. We need more spaces for learning. We need more spaces for exchange. We want to work with other networks. But at the end of the day, when you offer it to them, they don't take it. They have too many other things to do. And so it's proving to them, showing to them, demonstrating to them that, like, what we've put together is something that's really valuable to you. Or if it's not, it's adapting and figuring out something that is more valuable. And that's the trickiest of, one, the language of ecosystem. Another thing that I've learned is not making it too technical, but really making it feel real to people. So if you make sure that it's about a specific purpose or a specific something, which is, I think, what you're trying to do, Galu, is make it about a specific sector thing, like make it just real and meaningful to what people want and need. And that's where the magic is going to happen. Wes, you've had your hand raised for a while. Go ahead if you want to chime in.
Yeah, sure thing. I think language is the thing which trips us all up a lot of the time. I do like the term ecosystem. I also like organism. I think there's ways of thinking of, one word I heard this week was tentacular, and it's a word by Donna Haraway, that the tentacles of an octopus are actually independent. They have distributed intelligence, and it's the tentacles working in operation with the whole of the organism, which gives the octopus its character. So it gives us this ability to make sense of its environment, the ability to operate and interact with its environment, and it does it in a very distributed way. And this is why I'm saying there's like a networks of networks present a type of evolution of organism, or an evolution of organization. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's my feeling of it, is there's a way to look at it in a very natural way. So not just ecosystems where we sort of don't see the intelligent behavior, but we can look at, for example, an octopus and actually see the intelligent behavior at work. So it's sense making, it's the intent and fulfilling of purpose through all its parts, and it's the health of the entire organism is related to the health of its individual parts as well.
Thanks, Wes. Bruce and whoever else wants to come in related to my comment in the chat, please do. I want to ask June, related to Wes's comment. It sounds like some of these points you bring up, Wes, about kind of how we're working, I think are relevant to networks and networks of networks or ecosystems. They're principles for working. And so I'm curious, June, do you see like specific either structures or ways of working that work differently for networks of networks? Like, do you need to approach it with a different mindset, or do you need to have different
No,
skills? Or is it just
You
a
know,
matter?
I really think it needs to emerge. And so I like the idea, and lots of networks, they want to get things clear, purpose and value and things like that. But I think networks of networks, there's, you know, the networks tend to be working on sort of different things and they're just overlapping. So to get one kind of purpose is often, you know, to get that bigger thing, it takes a while, and relationship building takes a while. And so this idea of doing trainings together, of sharing what you're doing, of supporting each other on actions before you move to a more intentional collaborative. You know, you may find that after doing some of that, just a network doesn't emerge. So you don't waste a lot of time trying to form a formal network of networks. You see if there's some there. Can people figure out things that can really add value to all of them? I mean, training's an obvious one, but getting money together for things like innovation funds to help, you know, self-organizing happen, those kinds of things, you know, are maybe smaller asks, and you can do that before you think about any formality. Just being practical about that. And I do love the idea of ecosystem too, because networks are about is building support. Like, how could, right now there are no there except actor.global, which is up, that are for networks of networks. And, you know, we don't even have good platforms for communication to happen. And so that's something, a network of networks, people could put money into a pot, help that kind of development happen, be involved in the co-design without having any formal network of network structure. With reaching out, like John was talking about, reach out who's out there that might have some value for you.
Right. I think a very practical example is that we all have our, in the networks, either we're running or we're in forms, their own data spaces, their own membership spaces. If you're in Europe, you have to actually abide by certain data rules anyway, but and how to cross-pollinate that is tricky. Bruce, you want to share your story?
Sure. So I manage the affiliate network of the North American Association for Environmental Education. And so not only are we as an organization a network of networks, because we have 3 other global network, our Global Environmental Partnership, and then we have our Natural Start Alliance, which focuses on early childhood. This network is all of the state, the US, and also a few provincial in Canada. And we just last year for our network, which is kind of a network of network, because each individual affiliate is a state professional association that is a network in their states. And then we just launched our new network work plan. So it is kind of a guiding kind of strategic document for our network, but then also has ways that our individual affiliates can engage, but it's not like a top down, you must do this, but it's a sort of a, what we're going to work on as a network. And then these are ways you can engage within your individual networks. And we're just starting to get hung up on, like, how do we make sure we have guidelines for self-organizing so everyone is included? So if someone's on a call and it's like, oh, we want to do this kind of community of practice, and then they start having those like do it a doodle poll, how do we make sure that everyone within our network is included, and not just those that have high capacity and have at all times, but we have affiliates who have no staff that are volunteer run. So trying to also honor that diversity of capacity within the network.
Yeah, and setting up stipend funds or scholarship funds, I think that's really critical to make some of this stuff inclusive.
How many staff do you have, Bruce?
So for the affiliate network, there's 2 of us who like are focused on that network, and one of my supervisor is focused also on advocacy for the field. But then overall, our staff's about 15. 3 networks and operations we do, because we have several
That's not bad. No, I asked because I was going to say there's another network that I'm in that I think does this quite well. They're Catalyst 2030. Use a lot of interns to do this because it's essentially a lot of grunt, and it's just making everything of it. Like they use Zoho as a platform, and I'm not a big advocate of platforms, but they're useful for some things. And I think having a central space where all events are, where all, like everything that happens in a group is available, so that where I found it useful is if I want to jump into a group at any point, I can. And if I leave for longer active, then I can easily jump back in. I know when everything is happening, and I get email alerts or WhatsApp messages or whatever the group is using. So I'm kind of kept in, and I can invite other colleagues to go. It's a really good process of open and transparent information. To do that, and to do that through multiple communication channels, is a lot of diligence, and you need kind of coordinators to do. But I think kind of for both, for complex and large, Catalyst 2030 is a complex and large network of networks. It's really, really helpful because you're going to have people coming in and coming out all the time. Some people are going to be dormant for years and then be active, and you need to provide those gateways and entry points for them. We have like 2 more minutes, but I'd love to hear from 1 or 2 more people. Any stories, anything that really pops out, anything that you're struggling with. If anybody wants to just unmute, we don't have to follow the formal fishbowl format before Seema will close us back out. Otherwise we'll call on somebody. So be brave and unmute before we call on you. Going once.
Sabira, Kelly, Angela, any questions?
Jennifer, Tim, Jess, Camilla, any of you? Nobody's piping up. It's fine. We don't want to pressure anybody. Motaz, do you want to, since you started us off, do you want to add a thought? I mean, I know you and Kirsten.
He's so good at thinking.
What Motaz is really good at is metaphors. Can you close us out with some sort of great metaphor for everything we've been talking about? I'm putting you on the spot, Motaz, but I know you can do it.
Well, okay. Well, that's where I was thinking about ecosystem precisely because it's broad enough to allow different kinds of growth to happen. It's like a garden. A garden is like open but produces things. And I love your comment, the tentacular idea, Wes, about thinking of like really specific purposeful collective intelligence. And I'm wondering what it looks like to attend to both. Meaning, like in an ecosystem, there will be some nurturing of a field, just in a general sense, just like in a loose sense, but there might also be some really specific engagements, really specific tactical engagements. And I think holding both and striking a balance between both, so having that really targeted, emergent, intelligent, innovative stuff with this general kind of like vibe nurturing. And something just from the chat, Kirsten mentioned the value proposition. I'm really sitting with like, oh, just thinking about what would the value proposition in a given context for a network of networks be, immediately starts to produce very clear prescriptions for what that network of networks might look like in a given context. So, and it's the same theme, I think, in a lot of networks themselves, like the value proposition, attending to that really clarifies so much.
I think that's a great way to close. So do you want to turn it back to you, Seema, to close us out? And thanks, Motaz, for jumping right in. I knew you'd be great.
Yes, way to come in on the fly, Motaz. This was a phenomenal conversation. I actually want to put a call out to all of you to reach out to us to see if you want to potentially host, sort of serve in the same role as Brendon and June and being a part of the initial fishbowl panel. And we'll do all of the organizing, the logistics, the bringing people to the table. But you all obviously have a wealth of experience and knowledge, not just on this topic, but I'm positive many, many others. So join us. We would love to have you host or co-host one of these sessions with us, if you're interested. The last slide in the deck that I sent you in that link is just about some upcoming opportunities from Collective Mind, our Networks 101, Network Management 101, Networks in Action, etc. Lots of great events. You can check them out on the website. Brendon, I want to give you the closing word if you want to mention your event.
Sure. Actually, our network of networks is hosting a whole festival for the month of May. It's all about networks. And we're doing this with Collective Mind and with other partners as well. I think what we'll do is we'll send you the details in email as a follow-up. We're still putting together the event formats and the website. It's a new initiative, but it's really about amplifying voices of people who are working in networks, providing a space for people to learn from one another. Really, I think valorizing all of this stuff that we're talking about and making it real, making it tangible. And also, I think building hope at a moment where we're all maybe suffering a bit from a lack of it, by telling great stories. And so just want to invite all of you to follow and join the festival. It'll be mostly free, mostly online. And I think it'll be a really, really, really exciting and fun engagement opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brendon. Thank you so much, June. Thank you so much for everybody who's in the fishbowl, outside of the fishbowl, everywhere evolving around the fishbowl. Thank you so much. Wonderful conversation. And we really, really look forward to seeing you all at some of these other events, conversations, participatory, interactive discussions, all of the above. So have a wonderful, wonderful day. I hope you get some sleep if you're feeling a little sleepy and groggy, and Brendon feel better.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody for a fun conversation.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.